All right. So, hi and welcome to From Many People's Strength, the podcast that covers Saskatchewan politics and current events. My name is Cory Johnston, and my pronouns are he, him.
My name is David. I'm David Richards. My pronouns are he, him, or they, them. And we got another exciting week.
An exciting week in Saskatchewan
Exciting week
politics.
in Saskatchewan politics. I think it's we got a bit of Groundhog Day going on. I feel somewhat bad because I think we're gonna revisit some of the same issues and topics we discussed last week. It's So there'll be a bit of repetition probably here, but I think some developments to go over as well. So I think there's still plenty to talk about in the world of Saskatchewan politics this week. That's for sure.
Yeah, it seems like on some level, politics continually has the same issues coming up and up over and over again because nothing ever gets fixed.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we have to keep talking about the same problems.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is what it is, and we can get into that a little bit more as we go here. So
yeah.
Any topics that you're just champing at the bit to get at?
Well, let's see. We got I guess it's not a super exciting note, but we had on the 23rd there was an article coming out about the swearing in for all our Regina City councillors and whatnot, which happened on, I believe, might have been that night or the night after.
Yeah, I think it was the 23rd.
That night, the 23rd. Yeah. So we got Shannon Zakidniak.
Yeah, Zakidniak, I believe.
Yeah. Landon Mole for Ward 10. Cheryl Stadinichuk.
You're doing well.
I'm awful with names. For Ward 1, Tarina Shaw for Ward 7, and Daniel LeBlanc for Ward 6 are all the new councillors. And obviously Sandra Masters was our new mayor.
So 6 out of 11, more than half are new.
Because
again, the mayor gets the tying vote.
Yeah, that's right. So that's
interesting. Like I said, I think it's a positive thing. Again, it's always interesting. We talked in previous episodes about how we are a bit too big to sort of know them on a face-to-face or first name basis, but social media connects us to people. So friends with some counselors on social media, and I'm pretty jaded at times. I've got a little bit of that cold iron heart going on, but Tarina Shaw posted some pictures out her window from her office, and just talking about the experience and this new office she has and how excited she is, and
cool.
It's one of these things where I think municipal politics has this feel of, the old boys club. Federal and provincial politics obviously has that as well. But municipal, I think sometimes even more so feels like it's the same old people all the time.
Right.
And in Regina, I think we've got we got a bit of a shakeup. We'll see if that's good or bad. Obviously, there's downsides of, where the experience lies, and I've certainly raised concerns about Masters herself and what some of her policies might be, but the idea that we've got fresh blood, as it were, some new faces. I think it's refreshing to see people excited about the job, genuinely showing emotion, and happy to be doing it, and excited about what they might be able to accomplish. I think we hear a lot of people almost treat it like a burden to be in politics. And don't get me wrong, I think there is a burden element to it at times too. I'm not taking that away, but I think it's somewhat refreshing to be like, no, this is something I wanted to do. I'm excited to be doing it. I'm looking forward to this job. It's a new job. It's an exciting job. It's one where I can make things better for people. That's nice and refreshing to see.
Yeah.
I will go beyond that for commentary, as we go. I won't stick to just repeating how refreshing that one thing is,
but it is refreshing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what else do we got? Right off the top, we got, I guess, Saskatchewan nurses union got a contract.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Kind of an important time to have nurses that are happy.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think if it had reached the point of a labor dispute at this point, I don't think anyone wins in that.
No,
I think that the
right.
province is aware that they're not going to come out good from a PR standpoint if in the middle of a the largest health crisis of the century,
yeah,
it is the bad time to do that. And I'm sure there would have been people who viewed the nurses as the villains in that circumstance as well, because there always are. But I think it
seems to be kind of a positive, common narrative here.
Yeah.
Is that like when the unions are on strike, oh, you're an essential worker, therefore you shouldn't have the right to strike, kind of thing. Like, but that's not how any of this should work. Like, we really got to value these people and the job they do.
Yeah. That to some extent opens up the bigger topic of the right to strike. That always seems weird to me. That it sort of speaks to some degree to what some of the stuff we talked about last week on it's the softening of the edges of capitalism,
right?
That prevent the more hardcore, communist or socialist ideas to come to the fore.
Yeah.
Because we quote unquote allow striking now.
Right.
100 years ago, no one was allowed to strike, but they went on strike anyways.
And that's when things got changed, right? They weren't just striking for like a contract; they were striking for systemic change.
Absolutely. And sometimes unions are striking for systemic change now as well. I don't want to undersell that. Right? Like it is often, it is often during union negotiations that anti-harassment policies get put in major corporations. It is, there are a number of modern changes within corporate culture that have been implemented because of union efforts. So I know you would never fall into the narrative that I hear all the time. Oh, unions used to be great, but they're not important anymore. Like, I know that's not where you're going. I want to be explicit on that as well.
I'm more of the unions should be striking more over more things.
Fair. That's fair. But it's so pervasive in so many parts of our culture. This isn't Saskatchewan politics, but it's Canadian. I remember going on a tour of the Parliament buildings in Ottawa. And there is a sign-up book for protests. So you can register in advance for having your protest on the lawn of Parliament, right?
Very convenient.
Yeah, right. So, and it's like, so you just need to go ahead and get the government's permission to tell the government you're angry at them.
That's right.
And the person who I was with talked about how wonderful this is and how it's this great aspect of Canadian society and how polite we are. And this was like years and years and years ago. But I just remember ever since it's just sort of like, no, the whole point. And like we've talked about, I'm far more centrist than you are in general, right?
But still, protesting isn't supposed to be at the convenience of whoever
you're protesting. And the same with striking, right? But because we've been conditioned to because the government has over the past 100 years given concessions, or in a lot of areas around this stuff, corporations have given concessions in a lot of ways because they have softened the hard edges. You don't have an appetite for wildcat strikes. Like most unions, most workplaces, if you went in and said, it doesn't matter that they've told us we're not allowed to strike, we're going to strike anyways because that's what we want to do, people are now going to go, what do you mean? No, it's illegal. We can't do that.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, no, the whole point of this is it's through collective action. We have the power. We don't need to be respectful, like respectful may be the wrong word, but we don't need to be obedient towards what the company or the government's saying in this case. We are saying we have the power in this circumstance. We are going to use that power to negotiate. It's the strong arm of negotiation tactic. But I'm glad we didn't get to that point with the nurses.
Yeah.
Look at me tangenting into philosophy once again. We're 10 minutes into the podcast. I think it might be a record for me tangenting into some broad philosophical point.
That's kind of the point of this, right? Like, yeah.
Fair enough.
We take broad lessons from all of these things. I guess, I mean, the doctors and such in Alberta, just next door, they had to do some wildcat strikes there not long ago. So it's nice. I mean, it would be nice if we had more action right now from our government, but the fact that they had this negotiation worked out and we have nurses.
They're not passing laws making it illegal for healthcare workers to quit and or retire and or move to other provinces. That part, we don't have to reach that level of comedic irony.
Yeah.
Painful comedic irony.
We don't have the same level of cartoon villain as a premier.
Yeah.
So
no, that's a good thing. I'm gonna one very quick point here in a broader idea. Media outlets sometimes need to do a better job of paying attention to what the links to their news articles shorten to, because the Globe and Mail had a link for one of their articles this week that says opposition NDP calls on Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe to create COVID.
Whoops.
When I was doing my reading for this week and trying to get caught up on stories, I'm like, this one? What?
That's not what he wants, is it?
Pay attention to where you cut things off. So if you leave off the 19 task force,
right,
that's a very different story. I was pretty sure the article was either like a Beaverton article or there was a typo in there somewhere. Essentially, it was a typo, but that can lead us into discussing the that article or that story.
I'm not entirely sure that the province needs, like, I don't know, I guess it would depend on what the task force was actually tasked to do, right? We have a health officer who's supposed to be doing this sort of thing. They're supposed to be, I guess, I would think they're taking feedback from people in different sectors who are like union leaders or like business leaders or whatnot. They're taking this stuff in, and medical professionals across the province. So I'm not entirely sure I'm on board with this, with Ryan Miley's viewpoint here.
All right. That's fair. And that could be one of those ones where my partisanship is coming through. And that, I'm hearing an NDP idea that the Sask party doesn't like, and therefore my automatic assumption is that it's probably a good idea.
That's a good assumption 99% of the time. So
I think part of it is the idea that you get different viewpoints, I think, is important. And part of me is trying to think if it was the other way around. If we had an NDP government, and the Sask party was saying, no, our opinion needs to be heard in this circumstance. And like, to some degree, we like that's the norm when it's a left-wing government that's in power, whether it's an NDP or a Liberal government. Like when when you have a left-leaning or left of center government, or even a further left-wing government, they tend to make pains to be, I don't say accommodating, but to have that spirit of communal working on things or listening across the aisle, much to their own detriment at times. I think one of the biggest, on a domestic standpoint, I think one of the biggest criticisms of Obama was how he let himself get handcuffed by the Republicans. He was so adamant on coming up with compromise solutions with them, that he, the watered down version of what he wanted to do still ended up being unpalatable and opposed. And I see that with NDP governments in Canada and Liberal governments in Canada, when they listen to Conservatives too much.
It's always,
but
I mean, this is a common narrative on the left, right? Like we see this all the time. It feels like the center or center left governments are always compromising with the right or the far right, and they never compromise with the left. Like, so it just, I don't know if that's always, it's probably not always true to that extent, but that is the narrative on the left. It feels like that. And,
I would say that might be a perception thing. I think there's probably, like there are probably people on the right who say the same thing the other way.
Oh, I'm sure.
Well, and you hear it, right? You hear all the time about, this is not Saskatchewan politics, but how Biden is capitulating and is controlled by the left wing of the Democrats, and he's controlled by AOC, the socialist, and
all leftists can say is, "I wish."
Yeah. And I think to some degree, I think when we make those, when we make those claims the other way, I'm sure there are conservatives who also say, "Oh, I wish."
Yeah, true.
But I do think there is more of a spirit of collaboration when it is a left-leaning government or a left-wing government that's in power, and like, again, maybe to the detriment, not just from the left-right point of it, but even from I think to your point, there's only so much a task force can do. Like, we need to eventually move past having committees looking into things. This one, though, like if you look at what he was asking for, he talks about multi-sector groups. He wants the NDP involved in that task force, but also healthcare professionals. Again, there would be labor leaders and business leaders and whatnot. And I think it adds that sense of transparency. And I see Mo's response being the same response he gives every time the NDP like try to put forward something productive, which is, we're already doing that.
Which is probably good enough to sell to people that already support him, right?
Yeah, to some degree. Yeah, probably right.
If they think it's a good idea and he says, we're already doing that, okay, good enough.
Yeah. And it was what happened with the that's how he handled the suicide prevention issue, both prior to the election, during the protest, as well as when the NDP brought it up during the election. We don't need that motion. We don't need that bill. We don't need that law. We're already doing it. We don't need a law to make us do it.
Right.
And again, it's just sort of things like, these are already people we're listening to. And I don't know. I think there's to some degree the transparency of having specifics on who are you listening to when you say these are already people you're listening to, who and which voices. And you know what? The NDP lost, the Sask Party won. They're the ones who get to call the shots on how we do this.
Right. But there is
and we still get to make criticisms of their choices.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. That's right. And there is a not insignificant percentage of the population that felt like that is like, say, NDP supporters. Like, we are still part of this province, right? Yeah. So we should, in a sense, have some input into the way that our province is run.
Yep.
I mean, just the fact that I know that's not necessarily the way it works, but just the fact that our team lost doesn't mean that we aren't living here and still impacted by the things that are going on.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
So again, I think that's that speaks to sort of why the task force, to me, seems appropriate. Like, you don't want to committee things to death.
Right. I wonder, like, if this was a thing that actually came about, then we might see more input from maybe leaders of like marginalized communities, or like groups that are frontline impacted by COVID, where right now I feel like we're seeing a lot of like very pro-business type ideas coming out of the government. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think possibly even more so, I think if you have a cross-section of business leaders, it may also put the lie to how pro-business this government actually is.
Right. Yeah.
One of the things that I find fascinating about Canada and sort of the corporate culture within this country is our business leaders actually tend to be more left-wing than our politicians are.
Right. So like, who are they serving actually?
and obviously not all.
Right.
And I use this example, like, again, probably more than I should, but I use this example all the time. Right after the U.S. had its global financial crisis in 2008, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the economy. The Harper government in 2009 attempted to sort of floated a trial balloon about deregulating here, bank deregulation, and basically moving Canada towards a system that is closer to the American system that caused all the problems in 2008 in the first place.
Right. Okay.
Mind-boggling, but read the room. But what was interesting is the CEOs of every major bank in Canada put out a joint statement saying how incredibly stupid that is, and basically, and I'm oversimplifying this to a large degree, but essentially every bank in Canada said, "Oh God, please don't do that. Don't like do not deregulate us. Do not allow us to do these things. That is a recipe for disaster." Because we will. Like, if you let us do
if you let us destroy your economy, we'll do it.
We'll have to, right? Because they're beholden to their shareholders. And they're like, like, if you let us do these things that make larger short-term profits for our shareholders, in spite of the fact that it will tank the economy and hurt everyone long-term, including us, we will still have to do these short-term stupid things if our competitors do. And it would be one of those ones where if that deregulation came in, what you'd probably see is all of the banks holding off on doing it until one finally breaks because of a shareholder meeting or whatnot. And then everyone has to, right? Because you have to be competitive. Yeah. And that's federal rather than provincial, but you see similar things on a provincial level all the time, and a municipal level all the time as well. And not that there aren't business owners and oil companies and whatnot that come out and say things in support of government, but like virtually, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if there is a single energy company in Canada that operates in Canada or has headquarters here that at a corporate level and on a corporate accountability statement level doesn't acknowledge man-made climate change as a real tangible thing. Like, so all of the oil companies, the companies themselves say climate change is real. It's a tangible threat. It is something that we need to deal with. And many of them, even again, oil companies are saying we need carbon pricing.
Yeah, that's right. And yet,
at least that's what they're saying publicly, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
again, what's happening public versus private is going to be a different thing.
Yeah.
But I think you do a task force like this for COVID, and you're going to find you do have a lot of business leaders who are on this task force saying, no, like put lockdowns in place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
right.
this
is a real problem.
This is a real problem.
But if you want to keep everybody open, then we have to stay open.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like if you allow us to, if you let everyone say, if you allow us to stay open and all 4 of my competitors are going to stay open, I can't afford to shut down at this point.
Right.
But if you put all of us into lockdown, especially if you put in place supports, then that's better for everyone in the long run. And you'll get more business leaders saying things like that, which again, if the government doesn't want to do that, that's its own. And again, who are they serving? Because I don't think they are serving business interests. Like, I don't think they are actually serving business interests by not doing a shutdown.
Right. It's almost more of a narrative than an actual like pro-business action, right?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, not to get too far into like conspiracy land, but
all right, conspiracy landed up. No, we're good. We haven't had a good conspiracy on this podcast yet. I'm curious.
I don't think we've mentioned the Koch brothers and like the Cato Institute and like these right-wing think tanks that have been pushing this kind of narrative about, and they publish all these articles and these papers on like things like this, where we have to, we can't take action on climate change because it's going to hurt business, or we can't raise taxes because it's going to hurt business, or we can't do this or that or the other thing. And it's all very like you said, like it's narrow-minded, misguided in the long term, but it's very short-term profit driven. And I mean, there is an entire ecosphere of think tanks that put this stuff out, and it's become the conservative ideology in a sense.
Yeah.
I hope that didn't sound crazy, because
no, I don't think it sounded crazy at all. I think to some degree, you have this, the expression, you've caught a tiger by the tail.
Right.
Like, and I think the Trump effect is largely a symptom of that. It's, they've channeled this force within the electorate, and within certain moneyed interests that is powerful, got them a lot of what they wanted to accomplish, is scary, is dangerous, it frightens away their enemies. But now what? Because it's going to kill them eventually, right? Exactly. Like, as soon as the moment they let go, it's going to destroy them. So they have to hold on for dear life.
It's a goddamn tiger.
Right. And I think, if you have tied yourself to something dangerous, whether it's you've tied your entire political movement to Donald Trump, or whether it's you've tied your political outlook on a virus toward it not being a big deal and that masks aren't important, and et cetera, or public freedom, all these things. I think it's dangerous to let go, because we will see what eventually happens to the Republican Party, and when they are finally having to let go of Trump, and we're already seeing that to some degree as he's turning on people like Governor Kemp and other Republicans who acknowledge reality exists. And I think we're going to see what happens when sort of the truth starts hitting a bit harder with COVID in this province, because I think it's hitting pretty hard in a lot of places, but I think we have not faced the brunt of it yet, and I think we're going to be in the next month or two.
I just like something like what's going on in Manitoba right now seems like a portend of sorts. Like, we could see this coming, right? We just have to do something about it now.
Yeah. But as soon as you acknowledge that it's a problem, it allows your political enemies to go, why the fuck haven't you been doing this for the last 3 months?
Right.
And like, it's, and
yeah.
There's so many analogies that come to like, and I think that's part of human nature, right? You're like, how many times have any of us been in situations where we fucked up and we know the sooner we admit it, the better off it's going to be for us, but we still continue not admitting it and not admitting it and not admitting it because
just holding
we know,
off, hoping that
because we don't want to have to face that consequence, right?
Yeah.
You know, the kid who didn't do his homework and still never does it because he knows as soon as he starts down, like then you have to confront the reality that you're late or you didn't do it or you're going to get it back. Like, and I think you're encountering some of this with some of these conservative leaders when it comes to COVID on the, like, eventually the reality is going to set in that they didn't do enough. And like I said, we've talked before, we both think Mo did a good job. Like at the start, like March, April, May, even June, Scott Moe was okay on this topic, right? On this specific issue. Pre-election Scott Moe did not bad. And then these last 2 to 3 months, like in the immediate lead into the election, and since then, I think is where the problems come in. But now, if you like, the moment he admits that he needed to have done more 2 months ago, that's admitting a mistake. And I think that's admitting a mistake is like,
it's hard.
It's hard. It's hard for anyone. And I think within the political climate that we have, and again, this very much could be a skewed partisanship thing where I see it from one side and not the other, but I honestly don't think it is on this one. Admitting to a changed opinion is very anathema to the right wing in North America. Like like I think it goes back to you think about the election in 2004 with John Kerry. I think that was 2004, where the main attack on John Kerry was that he's a flip flopper.
Yeah, wishy-washy.
Flip flopper.
Yeah,
it's the worst thing you can ever be is to flip flop. Whereas, like, I think on the left, we don't. I think we will point out hypocrisy in the right, but I think the idea that people's opinions change over time isn't in and of itself an inherent flaw that we see in someone. Like, if we have a politician who was, let's take a big issue like abortion. So if you have a politician who's on the left who 20 years ago had been anti-choice, and had come out and had passed anti-choice legislation and done a number of things on that front. And then you saw the change over time, and for the last 5-10 years has been actively pro-choice and come out and said, hey, here's why I thought what I thought 20 years ago. Here's why it was wrong. Here's why I changed my mind. That's not usually, like, to some degree that will still get attacked. I think you see the stereotypical Bernie bros. I put that in quotation marks. Will attack centrist politicians for shifting beliefs, and they've built up sort of this narrative around Sanders that he's never changed views, which is also bullshit. One of the reasons why I think Sanders reminds me of right-wing politicians more than left, but it's its own issue. I guess demagoguery politicians. I think that's maybe it. I come back to that in 2 seconds. But on the right, if you had the opposite, where it was someone who had been previously pro-choice 20 years ago, they will pillory that politician for that. That's not acceptable on the right, to have not been, like, they talk about, one of the things they brag about is I've always been conservative.
Right. Although they do love like a left traitor. They love to be like, oh, see this person, they don't endorse
Oh,
social justice
absolutely.
anymore, right?
Absolutely. But that person will never be their leader.
Oh, no, that's true. Yeah, no.
Right? Like that, Trump is a weird exception.
Yeah.
Um,
People, they've convinced themselves that he was always on their side, I
yeah.
think.
Yeah, I think that's true. But like, that will never be someone they admire. It will be someone they point to, but it's never someone that is going to be a prominent voice within their political movement. It'll be someone talked about, not someone listened to.
Yeah.
Again, hugely off topic, and I'll try and make this quick. I think what it comes down to is this idea of cults of personality, demagoguery, populism, even to some degree. Those are all like that refusal to acknowledge that there has ever been a fault within someone is very much inherent within that cult of personality idea, and that demagoguery aspect of things. Yeah. And for the most part, again, like if you think about, for them, like to a large degree, the demagogues we've had in North America in the last 30 years have been mostly on the right. And I think one of the reasons why I said Bernie Sanders reminds me of right-wing politicians, I think not that he is that right-wing, although he is on some issues, and argue about that off camera. But he feeds into that cult of personality and sort of demagoguery feel, and I think that's where some of that comes in. But,
yeah, there's certainly a level of Bernie's the savior, in a sense, right? The same way as like Trump's the savior. Like the like you say, like that demagoguery, they need a savior person, and too often that savior has to be pure, which means they haven't changed their views in any way. They were always right and perfect, right?
Yeah. And it's not about the policy, it's about the person.
Yeah.
Sort of linking it back to COVID. Someone online today, and I didn't even know where to begin on it. Because someone had talked to it's an anti-masker, and someone had talked to them about, you need to be, fine if you don't want to listen to the government, because it was a like libertarian, like, I don't want to have the government telling me what to do, masks or slavery, literally. And I was like, where do you
boy. Okay.
And someone said, like, everyone was just sort of flabbergasted by calling masks a form of slavery, because, man, is that not ever actually facing real oppression in your life if you think that. But they said, even if you refuse to listen to the government, then at least listen to scientists and doctors.
Yeah.
And then he kept quoting, he said, oh, well, what should I listen to? Dr. Tam, and it was sort of listing off all these doctors, and then was quoting them from back in January and February and March.
Right.
I'm like, yes,
wait a second.
They were wrong then, and yes, they made mistakes and they learned and they adapted, right? Yes, some of our leading scientists in January said, hey, they said this isn't a pandemic yet, but it's important that we continue to watch. Well, it wasn't a pandemic yet.
Yeah.
They, in March, they said non-medical masks are not necessary or not going to have a major effect for those who are not infected, or not showing symptoms. And then later discovered that wasn't true.
So they changed their
mind.
Yeah.
And that's seen as a weakness or seen as a bad thing.
Yeah.
And seen as a way to invalidate their opinion.
Yeah,
right?
like
Dr. Tam was wrong about something in January. It's an ad hominem, right? It's she came to an incorrect conclusion based on the evidence she had at hand back in January, February, March. So therefore, now that she has more evidence and has revised her views and perspective, we still shouldn't trust her. And I think Scott Moe has to be worried to some degree, is if he now says we need to start taking this more seriously and actually putting his money where his mouth is, that he's going to have that same sort of backlash. So
Do you think do you think that his close call with COVID is going to impact him at all?
Um, I would, I would like to hope so. I, I don't think it will.
Yeah, his test came back negative, right? So
Right, his stats came back negative. Um, I think, I think 20 years ago it would have.
yeah,
But I think there's too much of an apparatus around political movements now.
yeah,
You don't have you don't have those personally impacting events changing politicians' perspective on things in the same
right,
way
eh?
you used to
Yeah,
40 years ago. And I think there's too much of an apparatus. I think the political parties have too much sway over things. There's this beautiful clip um, from decades and decades ago of Fred Rogers, like Mr. Rogers, um, giving testimony to a Senate committee in the U.S. about cuts to PBS funding,
right.
and it was a done deal. It was the Republicans had the votes; they were going to cut funding to PBS, and Mr. Rogers comes in and gives this speech at the Senate hearing, and you had Republican senators who were like, you could see they were honestly, legitimately moved on an emotional level,
Right.
and like the cuts didn't like he prevented the cuts. He
Yeah.
essentially single-handedly saved PBS. Um,
Can you yeah,
and I don't think you can have that anymore. I
no.
don't think because you could have someone come forward and give the most heartfelt speech and give them data and give evidence and again, I think this one is on both sides, and I think you have this party loyalty now that is just so ingrained that you don't have sort of that individuals moved
Right.
to break ranks um, on an individual level that used to. Policies can change within a party. Like, and I'm not saying that doesn't
Right,
happen.
right.
Um, but
Yeah.
what you sorry, my my phone thought I wanted to find out about military ranks because I talked about breaking rank. Uh,
Uh,
um,
no, Google, I don't want to know that.
um, so like parties will still adapt and change over time. And again, by bias, I think the left wing parties are better at that than the right wing ones are. But I don't think you get those individuals moved to do things because of personal experience to
Yeah.
the same degree. I think you still have bits and pieces of it. Dick Cheney's support for gay rights because his daughter was a
Right.
lesbian. You have, some Hispanic conservatives in the U.S. who break ranks a little bit. Even that's not as much anymore, but like 10 years ago would break ranks with some of their more conservative colleagues around issues when it comes to immigration, like little bits and pieces here and there. But you don't have these incidents where a politician will have a personal experience with a thing and just overnight go, I've
Yeah.
had this experience. This is why it's changed me. I now understand this so much better. I think there's just too much incentive for them not to have that.
Yeah, I think there's certainly something to examine there because um yeah, just thinking about like the type of some of these heartfelt proclamations or the seemingly heartfelt proclamations of various politicians in the past, and then they very much when it comes time to vote on something or make an actual stand, then they just follow their party line, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you're right there. There's definitely something there that just doesn't happen the way it
No.
you might imagine it ought to.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the consolidation of political power within the party system is part of that.
Yeah.
I think both in Canada and the US, political parties as a unifying force of thought is a lot more hegemonic now than it was 30 years ago. Like I think you used to see a lot more sort of, again, breaking of ranks within political parties that you just don't seem to see anywhere anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, again, it's more of an American style example, but you do get like the red Democrats right now, right? That will, I mean, I guess when it comes time to vote, we don't know, right? But they say outright that they will not vote for things like universal health care, or they will not vote for, student loan forgiveness, stuff like that, that are more, or a Green New Deal, left-wing ideas. But rather than stick with their party, I guess. That also kind of plays into the party politics a little bit, because you've got you want to keep your party in power, right?
Yeah.
And you want to keep your power. And to do that, you have to, in those places, because of their system, they have to placate their more conservative constituents. Yeah. So I guess it doesn't make me happy, that's for sure.
No. And you're still going to have a spectrum within the parties themselves. But like I said, it's you just don't see the overnight change. I think in this case, I don't think that's going to have an impact on Mo's the approach. So we have a couple other COVID related stories, some sort of direct, some indirect. There's the, Saskatchewan health policy consultant, Stephen Lewis, sort of came out, was pretty bold. I don't know if I think he's sort of saying the same things we've been saying. He's probably more blunt than even we are, because he flat out called the government stupid.
That's right. Like this is you read it and you go, okay, yeah. This is dumb. What are we doing here? But so like you say, it's basically what we've been saying, but much harsher.
I think the one thing that we sort of two other tangential stories, I think it's important that we talk about, the one regarding the prison system, as well as the CERB overpayments. So which of those two do you think we should tackle first?
Well, let's just quickly go over the CERB overpayments. It's federal government, but apparently 213,000 Canadians may have to pay back the government, although the CRA says that they're not doing like any collection actions right now until it's appropriate to do so. I don't know what that means. It seems like pretty fluffy
just be
language.
Aware that this could happen.
But I mean, I'm of the opinion that they should just say they shouldn't do any of that. That's me. This is a situation where like lots of people ended up getting double the payments, often not through their own fault, and not because they applied for two payments, or not because they were being dishonest, but just because of the structure of the way it was rolled out. And I'm sorry, like, why should I pay for the government's mistake? Now I got to pay back this money that I spent on my bills trying to live.
I'm sort of like, if I had to pick, I would agree with you. I'm kind of 60-40 in my own mind about this.
Okay.
And the only reason I say that is when these plans were being rolled out, one of the things that the government did that I appreciated was they said, let's get the money in people's hands, and if we make mistakes, we'll fix it later.
Right.
Like, we need to get money into people's hands right away. Let's not waste 3 weeks making sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
I agree with that.
Let's get this done in a hurry, because people need money yesterday. So let's not make them wait 3 weeks. Let's get it into their hands in 2 days.
Yeah.
And they did, with the understanding that if the mistakes are made, the mistakes will get fixed later.
Yeah.
The problem is then the mistakes, then how do you fix those mistakes later? Right.
Yeah.
Like
that's right.
These mistakes happened because this was an unprecedented event and we rushed something. We rushed money into people's hands.
An unprecedented response for an unprecedented event.
Exactly.
And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to give them shit for giving people money quickly, right?
Yeah. And as far as taking it back, and I think my concern on that is, like, if we find ourselves in a similar situation again in the future, will this now mean the government says, oh, no, we need to wait 3 weeks to make sure we're doing this correctly?
Well, are they not going to learn and have a
right? Like for this, I'm hoping we don't have a once in a century pandemic again soon. Although I think it's not going to be another century before.
I think you're on record as saying it's going to happen sooner.
Yeah, I think I am on record as having said that, and I still believe that.
But yeah,
and I think having pandemic response plans in place and all those, but something different, right? Like something we didn't think of happens. There's something that occurs that completely catches us off guard. There's a corruption of our computer systems that cause all direct deposit and EFT systems to be shut down for 3 weeks, and no one can get their pay deposits or pre-authorized debits coming out of their account for 3 weeks, regardless of what bank they deal with.
Right.
When that happens, do we want the government to say, okay, we're going to mobilize Canada Post. We're going to get physical checks into people's hands. We're going to activate all of these other resources and make sure people have resources at their fingertips. And if we make mistakes, we'll fix those mistakes later. Or do we want the government going, we overpaid last time. We rushed things last time and overpaid, and we're never able to get that money back. We need to be more cautious. I still think you err on letting people keep the money now, and you still rush next time too, right? Like I think
yes.
Ultimately, we have social safety nets in place for a reason. Again, this one is a little different. I think one of the things you look at is, rather than worry about collection, if you want to worry about reclaiming it, you apply that to a debit against future events, right? So you don't create and there's logistics in figuring out how to do this. But if you implement a future tax credit, if you are still owing CERB money, you don't, like that tax credit goes to repayment of CERB first. That
is one of the things that they actually talk about in the article. Just briefly, they say those measures remain on hold for payback during the pandemic, but they could include taking away future tax credits, which or refunds, or if you withhold, if you don't pay your student loans back, your government student loans, or at least that's how it used to be for long enough, they would just take your tax returns. So
and there's things you can do around that. I think you just need to be really cautious. And again, I think them not doing the collection now is the right thing. I remember years ago with an employer, I had a similar incident happen where I had gotten overpaid for a series of months, not realizing it. And it was like 6 or 7 paychecks I got overpaid. And then they got taken off the pay spread out over only 2 pay periods. Those are really tight pay periods.
No kidding. Yeah.
Sort of
Jeez,
half my pay for 2 weeks or for
wow.
2 pay periods, which is better than no pay at all for 1 pay period.
Wow. Yeah.
But I think it's important that you just make sure you're not doing that, and it's important that the provincial government not do what they seem like they're doing and saying, "Oh well, if the federal government won't collect it for people who are in
Then
hardship,
we will.
we'll
Yeah.
take care of that." So I think that's extra levels of shitty.
It's just conservative government just loves taking the working person's money, right?
Yeah.
They refuse to tax big business, but they'll definitely take it out of your pocket if they can.
Yeah. Only the wrong people.
Yes.
In
Yeah.
quotation marks, right? So
All right. So
speaking of
then,
exceptionally shitty,
yeah, we got where is that article here?
it's the
Oh yes, there it is.
you got it? Okay.
CBC, COVID now detected in staff at all Saskatchewan jails.
Yeah.
So, the union has asked, like, they've asked the government basically to say, like, we got to stop putting people in jail right now because we got COVID in there and we got people who are working there who are getting it, and like now you're going to be short staffed.
Yep.
And so instead, they're sending prisoners, people they arrest, to other cities.
Yeah.
Instead of, because they can't put them in the jails in Saskatoon, or like it doesn't mention anything about Regina that I see here, but this is the people of this province that I have witnessed who say things like, "Oh well, just lock them in there and let it run rampant." Like, it makes me like, you're forgetting that just because somebody is a prisoner, they are also a human being who has rights. Like, I've actually seen people say that you are in jail, you don't have any rights. It's just not true. You have basic human rights no matter where you are. Like in Canada, we don't take away your right to vote just because you're in jail. Like, you have the right to live healthy, safe lives.
One of the things that I find remarkable about the sheer audacity of the hypocrisy within that type of statement is these are the same people who will constantly pontificate over this idea that rights don't come from the government. That we have, like, rights are rights. You have rights no matter what. Some are
Right.
religious, they refer to them as God-given rights.
Yeah,
But
they're deontological, right?
But even the non-religious folk of this mindset will believe there are certain inherent rights that are not granted by the government. We just all humans have these basic unalienable rights.
Yeah.
But if it's someone I don't like, the government can still take them away.
Yeah.
Like, no, you can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
Now, I personally don't ascribe to that view. I do think, like, rights are things that we communally agree upon. So there essentially aren't fundamental inalienable human rights. Rights
Right.
are those things that we agree upon as a society. But getting caught smoking pot 5 years ago shouldn't mean you lose them.
No, that's right. I might even argue that a violent person who has committed a crime still has certain rights.
Yeah.
And that, it's just doesn't seem to be the consensus among Saskatchewan residents.
I think, like, Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms has a wonderfully uniquely Canadian clause to start the whole thing off. Very first clause of the Charter is the reasonable limits clause, which says every single right is subject to reasonable limits. And we implement those, right? If someone is a danger to others, we put a reasonable limit on their mobility rights.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm more and more coming around to being a prison abolitionist.
Right.
I would say I probably am. I'm just, I think that you need to have some really serious thoughts about the logistics of this.
It needs,
but
it takes work, right?
Even if you're not, even if you acknowledge that prison is in and of itself a reasonable limit on certain rights, the rights against I'm trying to think of the term, unreasonable punishment, cruel and unusual punishment,
right.
Still exists. Like the right to be protected from cruel and unusual punishment not only still exists for prisoners, it exclusively is a right of those who are incarcerated by the state. Yeah. Like that is specifically a right across Western social democracies to protect those who are in the custody of the state. And for any crime, we don't have the death penalty in Canada.
No, that's right.
Effectively. And so, like, we shouldn't be killing people who are in jail just for the sheer fact that they're in jail.
Yeah, whether that's through neglect or harsh conditions or letting a disease run rampant or anything. They shouldn't be dying in a set if we can prevent it. One comment I saw on an article, I think it might have even been on this article, was something to the effect of, well, let them suffer. They're not decent citizens. Like, let's worry about the decent citizens of our community. And it dehumanizes people based on an incident that we don't have the context of their life to understand everything about it. And I'm not saying that everybody who hurts somebody should be 100% forgiven, but we need to understand the context of somebody's life before we can judge them in a very real sense. And we can't just abandon them to die and because they're not a quote unquote decent citizen.
A friend of mine once talked about how we judge ourselves by our intentions and others by their actions.
Yeah.
And I think this speaks that. And I think to some degree, it's how close we are to someone determines how much we try and judge them on their intentions rather than their impact.
The farther away, the more action type of situation.
If our friend does something, we always have reasons for it.
Yeah.
And a couple I knew, virulently anti-immigrant, except for the immigrants that they themselves were sponsoring because they were good Christians. Right. Like it was that they're different. They're not the same. It's the men who say you're not like other women.
Or what's that? The racist trope of you're the good one.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
I don't like anybody of your race except you.
So, I remember this is going back, probably 15 years now, because I was still listening to Gormley on a regular basis. But I was listening to Gormley when I can't remember if it was speed limit cameras or red light. I think it was the red light cameras that were coming in, and that there wasn't a police officer. There was going to be automated giving of tickets.
Okay.
I think it was red. I think it was the red light because the speed limit ones came in later. But the same issue came up both times, where you listen in on a show and all of these people who are hardcore right wingers, they were, every other episode they'd be talking about law and order and harsh punishment, We're whining and complaining about these $50 tickets that, here's why I shouldn't get a ticket. And, if the cop wasn't there, here's how, like, if the cop was there, I would be able to talk my way out of it. They wouldn't phrase it quite that way, but
that's what they mean.
Essentially, that's their argument, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about, if you were to suggest anyone who comes out and is, we should punish these people and if you come out and suggest to them, you know what, I think crimes that have a serious potential of causing bodily harm and death to other citizens should be punished. And I would like to see mandatory jail sentences of at least 30 days for anyone caught speeding even 1 kilometer an hour over the speed limit. Because if you put that in place, you won't see speeding anymore. It'll be safe. It'll cut down on traffic fatalities. No one needs to speed. Like, we all have, modern cars have excellent speedometers.
Yep.
There's no wiggle room there. If you were speeding, you were speeding. If that's the punishment, you'll take steps to not speed. You can use cruise control on the highway. Maybe it'll now be worth buying a car with cruise control if you couldn't afford it before.
Yeah.
Right. Like, all of these excuses go out the window. All of a sudden, no one's pro law and order anymore.
Right. Yeah.
But
not that law.
Speeding. And don't get me wrong, it's not like I've never sped while driving, but speeding, we know for a fact speeding kills.
Yeah.
We know it causes physical harm to people. You literally are putting other people's lives at risk when you do it, as opposed to drug possession.
Right.
Like, if someone in downtown Regina has a heroin needle, that has a 0% chance, or 0.00001% chance of actually causing me harm.
Right. Yeah. No,
like,
right.
the odds of some weird circumstance of cause and effect leading to that causing me harm is statistically negligible.
Yeah.
There are societal harms. I think it should be treated as a health issue, not a crime issue. Yep. That's its own thing. But if someone's possession of heroin, possession of meth, possession, I don't care what drug it is, drug possession will never harm me. Yeah. But that person goes to jail. Yet the guy ripping down Arcola at 90 kilometers an hour in icy conditions, because he's late for work and knows he's going to hit traffic once he hits the ring road as he's heading into town, absolutely there's a chance of him hitting an icy patch and T-boning my car as I'm waiting at the red light.
Yep.
Right? Like, absolutely. Yep. That, and it does. That's not just hypothetical. We know speeding causes accidents.
Yep.
But the people in jail aren't there based on the harm done by the crimes they've done. They're there because they're the wrong sort of people. And people that those who think lock them in and let them suffer the consequences, it's not because of the crimes that they committed.
No, it's because they don't approve of them as humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
in a very,
that was a little ranty of me. I'm sorry. That
was perfect. That was good.
Sorry. I had a little.
Yeah, no, that was perfect.
I'm the one pontificating now. That was my soapbox moment of the evening.
Yeah, that's sort of connected to the number of, like, we have had a large number of overdoses in Saskatchewan since the start of the pandemic.
Yep.
And I also had a bit of a rant about this, but not along the same lines, because the people, although related, the people now that you're talking about that are cool with these people going to jail for having a drug on them are now using the number of overdoses as almost a divergent talking point from COVID.
Yeah.
They love to say, well, nobody's talking about the overdoses. Nobody's talking about the number of overdoses that we're seeing. Like, I even talked to my dad and he said he did this. Like, where are all the people talking about the overdoses? And that same day, I see article after article talking about, the same day I heard that from him, I see article after article about the number of overdoses that we're seeing. And every day, I think that there is an overdose. We see another article talking about who this person is. A 32-year-old man overdosed in this street area of Regina on this drug, stuff like that. CBC did a bit on their front burner radio show, or which I would listen to as a podcast. There's a whole bunch of stuff being talked about when it comes to drugs, and the decriminalization of drugs and the treatment of it as a health issue is something that actually is going on. Like, they're really trying to do this in Vancouver right now, to the effect where, like, actually law enforcement almost doesn't go after people for drugs anymore. They're trying to get this to go through in a larger sense, but these, where am I going with this? it's frustrating to see it used as a smokescreen, right?
Yeah.
Like, they don't want to talk about COVID anymore, so they say, well, why aren't we talking about the opioids or the drug overdoses? Yeah. And we are talking about both. People who care and are paying attention are talking about all of it.
It's the same tired tactic that you see it happening whenever there is talk about compassion for refugees or increasing refugee numbers. You can guarantee, I guarantee, you post a CBC article about compassion for refugees or increasing the total number of refugees we accept, within 7 minutes, I would place money, someone will say, what about the veterans? What about homeless veterans, right? And it's like, it's topic for topic. You can tell which is going to be the derail. Refugees, the derail is going to be, what about homeless veterans? Sexual violence against women. Well, what about sexual violence against men? There's a few others that are just the standard. If someone brings this up,
if this, then what about the homeless people?
What about this?
If not, if no.
Yeah, and like throughout COVID, like really starting a month or two in, as people were starting to feel the effects of the lockdown, you started to hear this refrain of, but here are all these other social ills that are so much worse than COVID.
That they didn't care about before.
Right? And it's the Donald Trump line of, you can't let the cure be worse than the disease. I keep hearing over and over again from in these circles how, this is causing. The other day I had like, if you do mandatory lockdowns, it's going to cause mass starvation and suicide and homelessness. I'm like, okay, then let's work on solving those things too, right? Like, it's not like they didn't exist before, right? Like, folks are at risk. Like, if we have as a society are a well-managed pandemic away from starvation, suicide, and homelessness, we have greater structural issues, and I would argue we do. So let's fix those.
Instead of using them as a smokescreen, let's work on them.
we can do that. And then these are the exact same people who launch giant Soros-funded Trudeau conspiracy theories about the Great Reset. Do you not, like, you're saying that you're concerned about this opioid crisis and homelessness and suicide prevention and mental health and food insecurity, right? Like, you're saying that if somehow we tell people they have to wear masks and stop going places where they breathe on each other is going to cause all these things, you're recognizing that, like, we are living on the precipice at all times if those things can happen this easily. This quote unquote great reset you're talking is saying, let's fix those things that you're so worried about.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? Yeah. Like, it's not it's not some conspiracy of an ancient Jewish cabal somewhere secretly pulling the strings of Trudeau.
Right. It's just not.
It's just not. It's someone saying you're right. Like,
yes.
Again, we go back to this is a well-managed pandemic. People who are the anti-maskers and we're making too big a deal of it, constantly talk about how, the mortality rate is only this or only that. And usually they're pulling some number out of their ass that's way smaller than it actually is, by misreading numbers. But even still, it's the case fatality rate's around 3%. The infection fatality rate is probably actually closer to 1%. So you're right, like it is only about a 1% death rate, but 1% is a lot. Like that's still like hundreds of thousands of people in Canada if everyone got it.
Yep.
But we've managed it well. Like transmission isn't as bad as it could be. Fatality rate isn't as bad as it could be. Like this disease isn't as bad as it could be. That's not to downplay how bad it is.
Right.
But if these measures are literally killing people through not the disease, but the things we need to do to protect ourselves from the disease, maybe we need to do something as a society so that if something that is more infectious, is more fatal, does have a longer incubation period. Like if we encounter something that actually ticks a lot more boxes and is a higher level virus when you're playing Pandemic on your phone, we need to have things in place so that we don't die of suicide, starvation, homelessness, mental health.
Yeah.
When that happens, or when other crises comes along, when climate change all of a sudden is causing natural disasters, right? Like it's
mass migration and like
the opioid crisis is a thing. It's something important. Yeah. Let's fix it.
That's for sure. And there are legitimately people doing some work on this that care about this subject, and it is not hidden from you. No. It is in the news regularly.
And it's the people in any of those examples I gave, the people who are doing the yelling are almost never the ones actively doing work to stop the problems they're complaining about. And even more so, the people they are yelling at are almost always people who are actively doing the very people who do the most work for fighting for the rights of refugees and increasing our refugee numbers and making Canada a more welcoming place for refugees are also the same people who are fighting for better rights for homeless veterans and the homelessness in general, or the Indigenous population. And I will say, as a survivor of sexual assault, it is the feminists who are talking about sexual violence against women who have done far more to benefit me and my recovery than anyone who brings up, anyone who weaponizes what I have gone through as a way of discrediting what women who have been the victims of sexual violence have gone through.
Right.
I got two big rants in a single.
Like the people who, it's all like you say, it's always the people who are doing the work on one thing that are also supporting those people who are suffering from other things.
Yeah. So
the left is they're helping you.
So I again, these are issues. Like, I don't think anyone denies that some of the measures we're having to take to fight this disease don't suck.
Right.
Like we know that.
It's just how nobody likes wearing a mask all the time.
It feels gross. It's not pleasant.
And you got to have extras in case you sneeze.
Exactly. And I'm chewing a lot more gum because I'm breathing my own breath more often.
That's right.
But then things get cold inside. It's a thing, right?
Yeah.
First world problem, literally.
Right.
And like the isolation does get to people. It gets to me. Balancing out decisions around childcare, trying to figure out like how do I make sure my kids don't fall behind in school if I keep them home, but how do I help make sure they're safe if they go to school? Like tough decisions either way. Like there's a lot of, and again, I'm in a very privileged situation in a lot of these things. Like,
Yeah.
like I don't dispute that, and I still agree some of this stuff sucks.
Yeah.
But
it sucks.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it all sucks. That doesn't
Yeah.
change anything.
Right? Like, it's like no one likes wearing a condom, but you got to do it.
Do you want the risk of
Yeah.
STD or what are they STIs now?
Yeah.
Yeah, like
So it's there's also like seatbelts aren't comfortable,
but you gotta wear it.
but you gotta wear them, right?
Yeah.
And seatbelts are one that doesn't even affect other people for the most part. Like that's really just for our own personal safety.
Yeah, that's right.
I'd say there's a stronger argument for anti-seatbelting than there is for anti-masking.
Yep, exactly. And no matter how much you don't like it, no matter how big a hurry you're in, there are still speed limits.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is how this works. We all live in a society together.
Sigh. All right. I think we're repeating stuff at this point, so
yeah,
we can save some of the other joyful things for next week.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be some more things to.
Yeah, I think there's something that we didn't even get through this week that we can touch on then too. But anyways, it's once again it was a pleasure having the chance to chat with you. I want to thank you, Cory, for you do so much work in preparing for these podcasts and like doing the audio stuff after the fact and editing and doing all the tough stuff, and then I get to show up sometimes late and just rant into the ether for an hour. So I appreciate the work you do to make this all happen. So thank you a lot.
Yeah, I mentioned it I think before we were recording, but if I get my energy drink at just the right moment, I can stay very focused and get a lot accomplished in just
That's
one day.
fair.
So
when did I drink my tea today? It must have been at the time so that my peak ranting happened right while
there you go. You got your caffeine jolt just at the right moment. And
I don't think I could use that as an excuse. I was drinking decaf during the episode.
Oh geez,
I think the caffeine probably would have faded a while ago, but I can always pretend that was the excuse for me today.
Call yourself Jordan Peterson and say you had too much apple cider.
No, that was low blow. Oh,
sorry, man. I didn't mean to hurt you.
What did I do to you?
Yeah. Just reminded me of his excuse about I had too much cider. That's why I'm saying things the way I'm saying them.
Okay.
So I'm all right.
Completely sober. I'm not no all meat diet for me.
No, good. All right. You can find our podcast episodes at anchor.fm/from many peoples. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's at skpoliticspod. I've been a little bit more active on there lately.
Okay.
Our Facebook is facebook.com/from many peoples strength pod. And you can email us at frommanypeoples@gmail.com. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
have a great week with everything that's happening in the process.
You too. Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right. And then we'll do the countdown and a clap. Okay. So let's see. 1, 2, 3. Good.
Whew. I was nervous there.
Oh, geez. We're going to have to redo it.
Oh, okay. You're so good that time. That was better than any of the ones from last week.
Yeah. My Audacity was not recording the right microphone.
Oh, no. Okay. All right.
So, when I looked up and it was still a straight line. Oh, no. All right. Record. Okay. We'll start. 1, 2, 3. Good.
See, that time I didn't listen to your count. I just watched your hand. I think it was even better. You listen to the count. You pause. I'm like, I don't know the rhythm anymore.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I'm looking at the timer in the corner of the screen,
okay.
and so I'm trying to use a second, but then once I went too fast once.
Right. Yeah. That.
Wrecked the whole thing.
One was 3/4 of a second, and one was 1 1/4 seconds.
Exactly.
That makes it very tough. But I watched you, and that actually seemed to work better. So
good.